Hello, this is Jamie Magridge. Welcome to Jamie's Craft Table. Today I'm going to do 3 cards. I'm going to do a simple stamping card, a casual stamper card, and an Avid stamper card. And let's get started. This is going to be the first one. It's just stamping directly onto the card. So let's show you what we're going to be using. We're going to be using Magenta Madness, Smoky Slate, Just Jade, and Granny Apple Green. Now you could just pick one green if you want, that would be fine too. And Memento Tuxedo Black. Stamps, there's quite a few stamps today, just because for what I wanted, the sentiment, I wanted a big bold sentiment to fill a space, but you could use any sentiment you want. Now for the Avid card, I'm going to be using this embossing folder, the greenery embossing folder. Set that back there. Okay, Lovely You. I use this stamp here, this little flower. I'm going to try and do a variation and use a couple of the sentiments from this stamp set so that you don't need 3 stamp sets. Versailles, I use this stamp, and then from Tasteful Touches I use this sentiment here. Okay, so let's get started. Now for the first card, it's a thick white card base, 5.5 by 8.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. Okay, you're also going to need a scratch paper. So let's start with the Smoky Slate. I'm going to bring in this scripty one. I'm going to ink that up well with the Smoky Slate. And then I'm going to stamp off. And then I'm going to stamp it over here. It's pretty much in the center, but a little bit towards the left side. Okay. Then I'm going to bring in this leaf. That's from the Versailles. And I'm going to bring in Granny Apple Green. Let me clean this because I didn't clean it before. I don't want the dark ink in my Granny. Okay, so I'm going to ink it up with the Granny Apple Green. And I'm going to bring in Just Jade. And a sponge dauber. And I'm going to just add some of this darker color here and there on those leaves. So it'll give it a 2-tone color. I'm going to turn this so it's easier for me to stamp. And I'm going to just stamp this down right over the top of that stamp that I stamped before. Awesome. Okay, let's close these green inks. Okay, now I'm going to bring in Magenta Madness and this little flower. I'm going to stamp one flower here. Move over and stamp another one right here. There's these little ends here that look like they should have flowers coming off of them. One here. And I need one more down in here. Okay. Now I'm going to come in with a sentiment. For this one I'm going to use a different sentiment. Let's use Just Because on this one. I think I'm going to put it up there this time. I'm going to stamp that right there. Awesome. There's a card we just made together. You see that background? Is it too bright? There's the one I did previously. I like this. Okay, so that's the first card. Well, this is the second one. So for this one, we have our card base, the same as before. We have a 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 piece of Magenta Madness and a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of basic white. Okay, so let's set that part aside. We're going to stamp this very similar, almost exactly that we did before. So we'll bring in the smoky slate. Stamp off. Make sure the verbiage is the right side up. Stamp it down. Awesome. Now we're going to bring in the green. And where did it? There it is. I gotta wash this again. Well, if you're just using one color, you wouldn't need to wash it again, but since I added that second color, I don't want that darker color to get into my granny apple. So I'm washing it off. Okay. Open the granny apple. Let's open the Just Jade as well. Make that up. Use a little bit of the Just Jade on there. You really probably don't even need to, because this is a distinctive stamp, so it has the variation in the leaves already. Stamp it down. Okay. And we'll bring in the Magenta Madness. We'll do that little flower. Just wiping off the edges. This one has a tendency to get ink along the edges, so tap it lightly. Do one here. One here. One over here. One over here. One down here. Okay. Let's add miles apart but still in my heart on this one. That's pretty. Let's stamp that one down here. Awesome. Alright, now I'm going to add this to Magenta Madness piece, which is 1/8 of an inch larger. And I'm just going to use wet glue. Okay, and this is going to get mounted on the front of this card. Oops, it's upside down. You're probably all shouting at me, it's upside down. Okay, now for this one I'm bringing in some basic rhinestones. Bring in my take your pick tool. I'm going to stick one rhinestone on the center of each one of these flowers. And then I took the white seam binding. I'll show you how I did it, but I already did some in advance because it takes so long to dry. Took my stamp pad. I took the ribbon. I just took a stamp. Set the ribbon on the stamp pad. Put the stamp on top. Don't push hard, just lightly. And ran that through like that. You don't want to push hard because sometimes the edge of the ribbon's a little bit harsh and it might tear your pad because it's just a soft foam. Like that. But you have to let it dry really, really well because otherwise it'll get things... let me bring in the scratch paper so I can show you. It'll get on your card. Like when you go to tie your bow, see it's going to leave the ink up. I don't know if you can see it. It's going to leave the ink behind. So let it dry really thoroughly before you move on to the next step. Okay. Alright. Next. Oh, my bow. Okay. Let's see. Which one do I want to use? Let's use this one. Bring in a glue dot. Pick up the glue dot on the back of the bow. I'm going to add that right there. Tuck it in a little bit with my nail. See, I just got ink all over that. Rats. Must have had it on my hands. Alright, let's see if I can erase it. It's magenta, so it probably won't erase. And I did this one and heat set it and everything. And I still got... Maybe it's from the rag. I bet it's from the rag. Well, I don't think I'm going to get it all the way off. It's got to be from this rag. It's got to clean one out. Well, anyway, there's the card we just made together. Here's the one I did previously. A little bit lighter color here. I think I used a different pink. I think on this one I used the new polished pink, but I used a different pink layer here. But this one I used all the same color. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do the next one. Make sure I don't have any ink on me. Alright, this is going to be the third card. See, this is where I learned that it gets ink on everything, right there. So this one, get my pieces. I have a 2 by 4 1/4 inch piece of white, a 2 1/4, or well, it's 2 1/8. It's almost 2 1/4 by 4 3/4. It's just a scrap I had, so it'll make a nice border on here. I have my 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of basic white. I have a 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 inch piece of the Magenta Madness and my card base. Let's put those aside. First thing I'm going to do is bring in an embossing folder. I'm going to take this piece here, and at the top half, like probably almost half of it, I'm going to go ahead and emboss, run this through this embossing folder. So I'm not doing the whole thing, I'm just doing that top half. Okay, so let me go and do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got that. Okay, now with this bottom half, we're going to stamp our sentiment. And I'm going to go ahead and use the one I originally did, so you can just saying hello. It's going to go down here. Perfect. Okay, now this can get adhered to our Magenta Madness layer. Okay, set that aside for a minute. Now let's bring in this white piece. We're going to stamp this very similarly to what we did before. We're going to use the gray, the smoky slate, and the scripty stamp. Stamp off, stamp on here. Okay, I'm done with the smoky slate. Now we're going to do the leaves the same as we did before. My chamois, give it a quick wash. Granny apple green, just jade. Stamp it in this. Dauber with the jade, just in a couple spots. I'll turn this way, it's easier for me to get to. And I'm going to stamp this on there. I'm going to turn it a little bit sideways so I can get it all on there. If you just want part of it, you could do that as well. Perfect. Okay. Now let's bring in the pink. Magenta Madness. Our little flower. We'll stamp one here. And one here. One here, one here, and one down here. Okay. Now this is going to get mounted to this magenta madness piece. Center it up on there. Okay. I'm going to bring in a piece of that ribbon that I did before. This time I'm going to use seal, which is the top side, this side. Okay. I'm going to put some seal on there if I can get it started. Move that over. Don't have the best of luck with this. I just don't have the right touch for it, I guess. Okay, I'm going to bring in this ribbon. And I'm going to drape it across here and attach it in that seal on the back. Okay, now I'm going to bring in some dimensionals. I want to cover any seal that is exposed so that it doesn't stick itself to my card, and I also want to tack down just the edges just a little bit. The edges of the ribbon I'm talking about. Okay. Bring in this piece. Let's take off the backs of this. Get this out of the way. Okay, and this is going to go right here. Oh, I did it a little bit too long, I think. Interesting. That's alright, we're going to go with it. I forgot to cut it to length this way. So it might be too big even for my card, but we'll see. And we'll bring this in, and this will go here on the front of the card, like that. It's a little bit too long, but I'm not gonna worry about it. Use wet glue. Just like it better, and I know the problem with the seal in me is I just don't play with it enough. Center that. Okay, you know what? That's gonna bug me that that's hanging over. Let me bring in my long-handled scissors. I'll turn this over, and I'm gonna just snip off that extra. I'm a little out of practice. I've been on vacation for a week. There we go. Okay, you'll see on this one, I had it only the length of this white piece, and I forgot to make that shorter, so that's why it came out like that. Now I'll bring the bow. Glue dot. And add that bow. Come on, off my nail. and the rhinestones. There we go. There's the card we just made together. Here's the one I did previously. So there's the Avid card. Here's the casual stamper card. And then here's the beginner card. So either way, whatever. Hopefully you could find one card that you would enjoy making. Well, thank you for joining me today at Jamie's Craft Table. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you can find a little bit of time to play with some stamps, ink, and paper.